Hi, I'm Paul Arthur. This is Bridge City News. Here are some of the top stories we've been following. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith is butting heads with the federal government, launching a court challenge of the constitutionality of net zero electricity regulations. Leaders of the Alberta separation movement say they already have enough petition signature pledges to trigger a referendum. And Lethbridge police charge 3 people for alleged assault and kidnapping.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News.
Thanks for joining us. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith has announced her government is launching a legal challenge to federal clean electricity regulations, alleging that they unconstitutionally stray into the province's jurisdiction.
And today, we are taking another step to protect Albertans' livelihoods by challenging the constitutionality of the net zero electricity regulations in the Court of Appeal of Alberta, and we look forward to making our case. Alberta will no longer tolerate having our livelihoods threatened, our industries targeted, and our resources landlocked by Ottawa. We will not accept their reckless and dangerous policies that will harm our economy, stifle our energy industry, jeopardize the reliability of our electricity grid, and raise electricity prices for Albertans. Prime Minister Mark Carney must immediately commence working with our government to reset the relationship between Ottawa and Alberta with meaningful action rather than hollow rhetoric. We will not sit by quietly. Albertans expect to be treated with fairness and respect, just like any other province in this country. Our government will not blindly accept unconstitutional net zero regulations that put Albertans in harm's way. We will always stand up and fight for our province, and we will not let Albertans freeze in the dark.
Smith says the regulations pose a threat to Albertans' lives and livelihoods, with the risk of regular blackouts occurring in the summer and winter months. Alberta currently relies on natural gas for 75% of its electricity generation. Talk of Alberta separatism is heating up in light of Monday's federal election results. While Premier Smith has said her government won't advance a referendum on separation, she admits that citizens might. The NDP says the introduction of Bill 54, which changes some of the rules around elections and referendums, will absolutely open the door to further talk of secession. The changes lower the number of required petition signatures from 600,000 to about 177,000, and the time period expands to 120 days from 90. Lawyer Jeff Rath is with the Alberta Prosperity Project, a group organizing and currently working on gathering signatures for such a referendum. He is confident that it will happen.
We're confident we could do it in 30 days. If not 90 days under the old, under the pre-existing statute, right? I mean, that's how overwhelming the support for independence is in Alberta right now. So, one of the things that we're looking at is our goal for this month is to actually get 600,000 pledges for signatures. And we're considering triggering, the referendum procedure under the old act and getting the signatures together in the 90-day period so that we can then have the bureaucrats and, Elections Alberta, have the lead time that they need to then organize the referendum, to have the referendum in this calendar year.
You can hear the full interview with Jeff Rath coming up later in this newscast. 2 Alberta Indigenous chiefs are accusing Premier Smith of attempting to manufacture a national unity crisis and are calling on her to stop stoking the fires of separatism. In a letter, Chief Sheldon Sunshine of Sturgeon Lake Cree Nation and Mikisew Cree Nation Chief Billy Joe Tucaro say Smith is enabling a referendum on separation in what they call a, quote, fanatical cell of individuals at a time Canadians need to unite. The Assembly of First Nations is joining calls for Hudson's Bay to immediately return its ceremonial items and put a halt on the sale of artifacts. National Chief Cindy Woodhouse-Nepanek says some items may represent vital and genuine aspects of cultural heritage and identity. The latest call to return these items to the Indigenous communities comes after an Ontario judge gave the Bay permission to move forward with an auction of the over 44,000 artifacts and art pieces. And there are also reports that Canadian Tire is making a bid for Hudson's Bay. Two sources tell the Canadian press the household goods chain has made a bid for some of Canada's oldest retailers' intellectual property. The company has a wealth of intellectual property, including rights to its famed Stripes brand, discount chain Zellers, housewares brand Gluckstein, apparel line Hudson North, and its distinctly home bed and bath products. When asked whether the company is making a bid, Canadian Tire did not provide a comment. Residents of the Alberta mountain town of Canmore are divided over a new tax on vacant homes. The tax will apply to homeowners who leave their residences empty for more than half the year, as part of the town's effort to reverse an affordability crisis. A court ruled this week that Canmore is within its rights to move forward with the tax next year, which will divide residences into subclasses, so it can tax mostly vacant homes at higher rates. Some part-time owners argue the move unfairly punishes faithful property taxpayers, but others say the growing number of weekenders has hollowed out Canmore's community feel. The Supreme Court of Canada is set to look at whether a challenge of ethics ruling in Justin Trudeau's involvement in a decision about We Charity can proceed. The group Democracy Watch applied for a judicial review of Federal Ethics Commissioner Mario Dionne's decision in 2021. Dionne had concluded Trudeau did not breach the Conflict of Interest Act when he participated in a decision about We Charity, which operated in Canada and abroad. Federal lawyers argued the application should be tossed out, in part because the Conflict of Interest Act bars judicial reviews concerning questions of fact and law. Canada's top court will hear the appeal of a Quebec ruling that invalidated random police stops. The case is about whether it's constitutional for police to make a random traffic stop without reasonable suspicion that the driver has committed an offense. Canada's highest court has granted the Quebec government leave to appeal a lower court decision that said random stops lead to racial profiling. The SCOC will in part be asked to weigh in on whether stopping drivers with no apparent reason violates the Charter. Also today, the Supreme Court decided it will not hear Ontario's appeal in a youth-led climate case. The decision means the challenge will instead be revived in an Ontario court. Legal experts say the case brought on by 7 young people could clarify whether governments in Canada have any constitutional obligation to protect Canadians from climate change. The group is asking for a court to order that the Ontario government come up with a science-based target in line with Canada's international climate commitments. Canadian travelers are being advised to exercise a high degree of caution because of the threat of terrorism in Spain and France. The government says on a 1 to 5 scale, the current terrorism threat level in Spain is 4. The threat level in France is currently at 3, which is the highest on that country's national alert system. The government said there is a threat of terrorism in Europe, with attacks having occurred in several cities. It says further attacks in Spain cannot be ruled out, and travelers should check French media and online for changes to the threat level in France. The head of the BC division of the Canadian Mental Health Association says Canada hasn't done the work it needs to do to prevent tragedies like the Vancouver Festival attack on Saturday that killed 11 people. Jonathan Morris says any review should investigate every factor that was involved, noting it's important to let the legal process unfold to fully understand what role mental illness played in order to prevent the risk of stigmatization. Morris says the way the tragedy is discussed affects how those with mental illness see themselves and how others see them, and it could even stop people from getting help. The U.S. and Ukraine have signed an agreement that will give the U.S. access to Ukraine's vast critical mineral resources. And while U.S. President Trump is heralding this reconstruction and investment deal as a way of ending the war with Russia, residents in the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv are skeptical.
Я думаю, що така угода, з одного боку, вона потрібна Україні, бо треба буде відновлюватися після війни. З другого боку, я ж не знаю, які там умови прописані, то цілком може бути, що вони зовсім невигідні для України. Ну, але мабуть, якщо її підписали, то наші фахівці все ж таки якось порівняли плюси і мінуси. Я сподіваюся, що це буде на користь.
З одного боку, якщо представиш одні джерела, то здається, що в принципі це не так погано. І це якась певна безпека, якась гарантія безпеки у нас. З іншого боку, треба знову ж таки дивитися, що там за ті умови. Певне, що ми їх не знаємо, і не факт, що ми колись дізнаємось повний цей текст документу. Якщо будемо бачити, зможемо дійсно якісь дати коментарі, щось розуміти головне.
Я жахливо до цього всього ставлюся. Я жахливо ставлюся до того, що наші людські ресурси на війні просто так м'ясо, за те, що наша земля – це просто розмінна монета в цьому світі, за те, що ми не маємо свого захисту, а ми полагаємося на когось. Ну, тобто, моє бачення те, що замість того, щоб укріплювати себе, ми далі починаємо все це роздавати, і мені боляче за нашу землю і за наших людей. Це єдине, що відбувається. Я впевнена, що є інші моменти домовленості, ніж зробити нас обніщавшими, де тільки можливо.
Trump has previously demanded that Ukraine pay back the $350 billion worth of aid that he claims has been provided by the U.S. during the war, a condition rejected by Ukrainian President Zelensky. Ukraine's prime minister says the agreement did not dictate that his country pay back any supposed debt. Also today, Trump is dealing with the first cabinet shakeup of his second term in office. Trump has named Secretary of State Marco Rubio as acting national security advisor to replace Mike Waltz, whom he is nominating for United Nations ambassador. Trump announced the move shortly after news broke that Waltz and his deputy, Alex Wong, were departing the administration just weeks after it was revealed that Waltz added a journalist to a signal chat being used to discuss military plans. Trump said Rubio will continue to serve as Secretary of State. The annual National Day of Prayer was held at the White House today. The event was featured on our partner station Merit TV Canada and Dr. Phil's Merit TV in the United States.
Mr. President, I can't tell you first off how proud I am to see religion coming back to the White House. God bless you. God bless you for doing this. And let me tell you, it's not a popular thing to do in America right now. And Speaker Johnson is here, and you know he's a man of religion. But you know, I've sat with President Trump with no cameras around, nobody listening, nobody watching. And I'm telling you, this is a man of deep faith, a man of deep conviction. And this is a man that wants this country to have a heart and have religion. And God bless America for giving us President Donald Trump. And when nobody's listening and nobody's looking, this man cares about every single person in America, independent of race, color, creed, whatever. And it comes from the heart with him. And I am proud to call him my president. And God bless you, Mr. President.
Today, Donald Trump signed an executive order creating a Religious Liberty Commission, of which Dr. Phil is a member. In local news, Lethbridge police have charged 3 people with kidnapping and assault after a 39-year-old man was unlawfully confined in a residence in a dispute between known parties over money. Police responded to a report on an assault on April 21st that took place at a Southside home. The victim suffered a serious head injury and also had his truck stolen in the process. He was then taken to a Westside home and held for several hours before he was able to escape. The accused, Crystalline Nicole Healy, Scott Cameron Slateholm, and Stephen Bruce Issel, are all charged with kidnapping, unlawful confinement, robbery, and assault with a weapon. Healy is additionally charged with extortion. The stolen vehicle, a maroon 1993 GMC Sierra with Alberta plate CVW8105, remains outstanding, and police are asking for public assistance in locating it. You can call police at 403-328-4444 if you've seen the truck. The annual Jane's Walk Festival is coming up this weekend. The event takes place in cities around the world, and in Lethbridge this Friday through Sunday, the community is invited to participate in walks in various parts of the city that explore the history that shapes our everyday urban experience. Festival organizer Anastasia Blomgren explains the walks will cover a variety of topics and spaces, including public art, parks, nature, historic sites, and neighborhoods. Blomgren says the event encourages residents to discover unseen, under the radar, and unique areas of their city.
Just to have people join the different walks that are interesting to them, get to know people in their neighborhoods, and primarily to have conversations so that people can learn about things and be exposed to new ideas and have those community conversations. We'll have some in Henderson Lake Park, Sunridge Park, downtown Lethbridge on 13th Street North, and a few other places across the city. So it's really important to show different aspects of our community and engage different people and different perspectives through our project. There's lots of different new things. For example, one of the walks is about new public murals in the city. So it's highlighting all of the new and recent murals that have been acquired to kind of emphasize what has been changing in the community.
The event was created in 2007 in Toronto by friends of urban thinker Jane Jacobs, and Lethbridge has participated in the festival since 2011. The Lethbridge hurricane season came to an end on Wednesday after losing Game 4 of the Eastern Conference Final on home ice against the Medicine Hat Tigers. The Tigers are in the midst of an historic run, making the finals for the first time since 2007 and dropping just one game in the entire playoffs so far on their path to make it there. BCN's Landon Hickok has more on that story.
The Medicine Hat Tigers held the Lethbridge Hurricanes back from a potential comeback to win Game 4 with a score of 5-3 and advance to the Western Hockey League Finals.
It wasn't fully there for us in this round, and that's unfortunate, but that is what it is right now.
Logan Wormold of the Hurricanes scored the early icebreaker in the first period before the Tigers scored 4 unanswered goals, including 2 from veteran Matthew Ward. The Canes stormed back in the third period, coming within 1 goal to tie the game, before WHL Player of the Year nominee Gavin McKenna put the game away with an empty netter in front of a raucous crowd of visiting Tiger fans. Canes head coach Bill Peters says that despite the loss, he's proud of how his team has performed overall throughout the playoffs and credited their resiliency.
Well, it was a quick turnaround for us. We went 7, got right in there. What did we do? I think we played on a Wednesday and traveled in Thursday and played Friday, and probably, guilty of taking a breath there a little bit and trying to get recharged. And I thought we were better after the day off for games 3 and 4, but by then it was too big a hole. They pushed in the third. There was some pride definitely there, and we wanted to extend it. So didn't get that one that we needed with, whether it's 6-on-5 or after Willie's goal would have been nice to get a little more zone time, but give them credit. They defended hard.
I mean, we haven't been out of the first round in a few years, so I think that was really big for us. And I know a lot of guys were really hungry this year to do that, and I'm really proud of the way that those guys carried their load around here and the way we pushed together.
McKenna has increased his active point streak to 52 games, including in the regular season, and scored 12 points in this series alone. Tigers goaltender and prospect for the Tampa Bay Lightning, Harrison Mennigan, remains undefeated in the postseason with a perfect 10 wins. Medicine Hat will await the winner between the Spokane Chiefs and Portland Winterhawks in the WHL Finals. For BridgeCityNews, I'm Landon Hickok.
Sunblock could be on the shopping list, as we should see a few more days of above normal temperatures. The full forecast is on the way next.
Our 7-day forecast has us with a high of 19 with a chance of showers for today. Tomorrow has a high of 16 with a nice sunny sky, alongside Saturday with a high of 28. Sunday will have a high of 13 with cloudy skies. Monday will have a high of 16 with sunny skies, alongside Tuesday with a high of 25 and Wednesday with a high of 28. Looking at today's almanac, the average high for this time of year is 16, with the low being 2. The record high on this day was set back in 2000 with a high of 25, and the record low was set back in 1954 with minus 13. The sun rose at 6:09 a.m. today and set at 8:49 p.m. Our national forecast has Victoria with a high of 18 and a chance of showers, and Vancouver with a high of 17 and partly cloudy skies. Edmonton and Calgary both share sunny skies and highs of 26. The rest of the prairies have Saskatoon with a high of 25, Regina a high of 21 with sunny skies, Winnipeg will have partly cloudy skies and a high of 14. Central Canada is going to get some showers, with Toronto getting a high of 18, Ottawa getting a high of 22, and Montreal a 20. All cities have chances of showers. The East Coast has Fredericton with a high of 10 and a chance of showers, alongside Halifax with a high of 14, and Charlottetown with a high of 11. Finishing off our national forecast with St. John's, we have a high of 6 with a chance of flurries.
TC Energy says profits for the first quarter edged lower as revenues decreased compared with a year ago. The pipeline company is reporting $978 million in net income attributable to its common shares for its first quarter, down from a year earlier. TC Energy President and CEO Francis Poirier says the company's results demonstrate the overall resiliency of our business. And Cameco Corporation is citing strong production of uranium and fuel services in its reporting of first quarter profits going up as its revenue rose compared with a year ago. The company says it earned a profit of $70 million for the quarter. That's compared with a loss of $7 million posted a year earlier. Uranium production totaled 6 million pounds for the quarter, up from a year earlier as sales volumes were down. Now, here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was down 46 points on the day to finish at 24,795. The Dow was up 83 points to 40,752. The S&P 500 was up 35 to 5604, and the Nasdaq was up 264 points to finish at 17,710. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 77 cents to 58.98 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 11 cents to 3.44 US. Gold was down 33.72 to 32.3907 US an ounce, and silver was down 21 cents to 32.40 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $8.90 per bushel, barley is at $6.97, canola is at $15.85, and corn is at $8.18 per bushel. Live cattle were up $1.25 to $2.0965. Feeder cattle were up 65 cents to $2.9322. Lean hogs were up 47 cents to $92.40, and the Canadian dollar remained unchanged over the past 24 hours and currently sits at $72.20 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith has announced her government is launching a legal challenge to federal clean electricity regulations, alleging that they unconstitutionally stray into the province's jurisdiction and pose a threat to Albertans' lives and livelihood. Talk of Alberta separatism is heating up in light of Monday's federal election results. Lawyer Jeff Rath with the Alberta Prosperity Project says support for Alberta independence is overwhelming. Stay tuned for a very interesting interview coming up next. When you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. You can also visit our website or YouTube channel anytime to check out more of our stories and interviews. With the outcome of this federal election, many Albertans and Western Canadians are expressing frustration and anger, feeling used and left out of the decision-making process. Now, the rumblings of Alberta separation are most certainly on the rise. Joining us to discuss this is Jeff Rath. He is a constitutional lawyer and the CEO of the Alberta Prosperity Project. Good to have you with us, Jeff.
Oh, thank you. Just to correct the record, I'm actually the general counsel of the Alberta Prosperity Project.
My apologies.
My good friend Mitch Sylvester is the CEO.
Okay, general counsel. That works too. Hey, why don't you first of all just tell us a bit about the Alberta Prosperity Project? What are you all about?
Sure. Well, Dennis Modry, myself, and a number of other gentlemen started the Alberta Prosperity Project about 4.5 years ago. We wanted to start a nonpartisan educational organization to educate our fellow Albertans on the benefits of independence from Canada, right? So we've obviously been working away at that for the last number of years, and we are now involved in helping to organize a referendum to remove Alberta from Canada and become an independent country.
Okay. Well, I guess what is the driving motivation to see Alberta separate from the rest of Canada? I'm assuming this has to do with.
I mean, the motivation's the same as it's always been. We're a colonized people. We're basically a colony of Quebec and Ontario. We're completely discriminated against within Confederation. Ontario and Quebec are guaranteed 3 seats each on the Supreme Court. Alberta's lucky if it ever gets one. The Maritimes, New Brunswick and Nova Scotia together are entitled to 20 seats in the Senate. Their population combined is 2 million. Ours is almost 5. We only get 6. So they almost have 7 times more Senate seats than we do. Quebec only has 9 million people, so it's barely double Alberta's population. It's guaranteed 24 Senate seats. Ontario's guaranteed 24 Senate seats. Alberta is basically treated like a colony of Eastern Canada, and we're sick and tired of it.
Send us your oil and gas money and equalization payments and just shut up. That's basically kind of how we feel, right?
Absolutely. And then when we go to Ottawa to protest the way we're treated, what's the reaction? They declare the War Measures Act, or the Emergencies Act, but it's effectively the War Measures Act. And they're trampling Aboriginal women in the street with riot horses because Trudeau and his cabinet ministers are all lamenting the fact that they didn't have access to Leopard tanks so they could crush us under tank treads like they did in Tiananmen Square. So this is Canada as it exists today. So, but again, let's leave all the grievance aside. I mean, there's lots of them. We don't need to focus on, the degree to which Alberta is, is a colony of Quebec and Ontario. I think that's just a fact. Read section 154 of the Supreme Court secession reference. They set out the test for what a colonized people is. Alberta meets the test from the standpoint of being able to unilaterally declare independence from Canada. But I'll just leave that for other legal scholars.
Yeah, we could probably do a whole 15 minutes just on that. Really interesting.
Oh, absolutely, right? But let's focus on the benefits of independence to Alberta, right? So we're in a situation now where let's imagine that Alberta is a completely battered spouse who's been punched in the face repeatedly by an abusive husband, right? And for sake of argument, let's call that abusive husband, Mark Carney. Okay, so this is the same guy that's been running economic policy for the last 10 years for Trudeau, shutting down our pipelines, denying that there's a business case for liquid natural gas to go anywhere in the world because of all the money he's making with his buddies in the Qatari Sovereign Wealth Fund, et cetera, right? So let's just imagine that, Carney is the abusive spouse. All he has to offer Albertans is a little box of chocolates. We're in the halfway house, right? We're out of the family home, because they voted us out in the last election. And, we're getting ready, we've got a restraining order. We're getting ready to move into a nice new house. And along comes Mark Carney with his little box of chocolates. Oh, I'll give you an energy corridor. Oh, I'll do this for you. I might do that for you. Oh, no, but we're not going to kill the anti-pipeline bill. Oh, no, we're not going to change the specifications on rail tankers so that you can move, oil by train to Texas. Oh, no, we're not going to get rid of the carbon emission tax. Oh, no, we can never, ever give up on the idea that we can actually limit Alberta oil production by putting in production caps.
Okay, yeah, no worries. It's really interesting to hear your perspective on this. Now, I know there's people who would say, well, we're part of Canada, so there's benefits to that. So what are the benefits? How would we be missing out on some things? For example, again, do we need to come up with our own currency? Can we keep on using Canadian currency, our own central bank, our own military?
We're not going to want to use Canadian currency because the day Alberta declares its independence from Canada with the full recognition of the United States of America, the Canadian dollar will be trading on par with the Polish zloty. So, obviously, we're working with bankers. Alberta will have a central bank. In the interim, we will likely be using the U.S. dollar, as our currency until the Alberta dollar, fully backed by the natural resources of Alberta, is up and floated. Central bank isn't a problem. As far as the military goes, those are all negotiations. But obviously, we're going to take, the independent Commonwealth of Alberta would take over all the Canadian military bases. We'd enter into an agreement with the U.S. To effectively meet NATO spending requirements for Alberta's own defense. We'll have our own defense force in Alberta, on a going forward basis.
Okay, well, let me jump in there for a sec. So, because I know you've done some Washington meetings as well with some of their leaders, to talk about, what kind of possibility would there be, to be the 51st state, if you will, to actually join the American Union, or would it be more preferable to remain an independent sovereign nation of Alberta? What's the
No,
preference
and
there?
just to be clear, we have had meetings in the United States
Yeah.
with at a very senior level within the present U.S. administration. We've been very clear in our meetings with the United States that we're not seeking status as a 51st state.
Oh, okay.
We're seeking status, as an independent, as the independent Commonwealth of Alberta, as an independent country. They're fully in support of that goal. Because keep in mind, from a U.S. perspective, they don't need a bunch of communist, Chinese adjacent globalists in Ottawa continually screwing with the American energy supply. The day Alberta declares independent, I would imagine that plans for at least 5 pipelines south through Montana are going to hit the table, including a pipeline to Tidewater through Washington State, right? With getting Alberta out of the Paris Climate Accord, getting rid of all the emission caps, all the ridiculous and needless federal regulation that's put on Alberta industry and the Alberta oil patch by Ottawa is going to increase the profitability of Alberta oil and will allow Alberta oil and gas production easily within the next 5 years to double. So, Alberta is going to become literally the most prosperous jurisdiction in North America. We'll have the lowest tax rates. We'll have the most thriving economy. The day we declare independence, we're going to have the highest GDP per capita of any country in the world. Because of the, when you factor in the interest, the $1.5 trillion that have been sucked out of Alberta through equalization to subsidize little crybabies in Quebec who are constantly threatening to leave. Canada owes Alberta $1.5 trillion, right? So I don't think we own any share of the Canadian national debt. As an example.
Interesting, yeah. Although to be debt-free, that would be amazing. What a,
right?
What could a nation do?
100%. And then the other thing to keep in mind too, and I know people worry about their pensions, but one of the things that we're discussing with the United States is the possibility of Alberta pension assets being converted at par into U.S. dollars with the support of the United States. The other thing that pensioners need to keep in mind is that Canada only pays. We send $9 billion a year into CPP. We only get $3 billion a year back.
Yeah.
So, if you think of the $70 billion that we send to Ottawa every year to only get $33 billion a year back, right?
Yeah.
Including pension funds, we can easily afford to self-fund, CPP and other, pension obligations in Alberta until such time as we successfully negotiate the return of the $339 billion of Alberta money, sitting in the Canada Pension Plan investment account.
So you're saying
right?
our pension plan essentially would be safe, or no? I don't have to worry about that, is what you're saying?
No, we don't have to worry about it at all. But the big point in the short term is that our pensioners don't need to worry because Alberta can fully afford to self-fund those pensions until we resolve whatever outstanding issues there are going to be with Ottawa in terms of repatriating our money.
Yeah, and I know there's a lot of naysayers, though, to what you're hoping to accomplish here. A lot of people saying, "Whoa, it's not going to be that easy," and maybe it isn't. But I guess how doable is it now? It got easier in the sense that just yesterday, the Premier Danielle Smith, introducing some legislation that would change the number of petition signatures you need, and also giving you more time to get those signatures, to bring this to a referendum here. So how? What are the actual numbers on that? Do you have that?
Well, the one thing we don't need is more time.
Okay.
Because as of yesterday, on the new numbers from in the proposed legislation, it's now 10% of the voter turnout in the last election.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So 1.77 million people voted. So that's roughly 177,000 people are required for a pension.
Okay.
As of this morning, APP has just been flooded with people providing their names and addresses, and they're not signatures on the petition, but these are people pre-registering and pledging to sign the petitions once they're circulated.
Yeah.
We're now over 250,000 signatures. We need 177,000.
What? You've got you've got 250,000 people saying they have pledged to sign, you know, because they'll have to do it in person, right? Okay.
Right.
And so you've got more than you need already. It's just a matter of, you know, I guess having enough troops on the ground to actually go and collect those signatures and present it to the Premier. Well, if the stars all align like you're hoping they will, how long would it take to actually get to a place where Alberta is a sovereign nation? That's not going to happen overnight. How many years would that take, you think?
It's going to happen this calendar year.
Yeah, well, okay.
I'm
serious.
serious.
Against that, but
well, you know, okay, but you know, you could, but if we're into 2026, it's going to be very early in 2026. One of the issues, just let me finish. One of the issues is the new legislation that Premier Smith is bringing in has a 120-day period. Well, that's a two-edged sword because we don't need a 120-day period, right, to gather the signatures. We're confident we could do it in 30 days. If not 90 days under the old, you know, under the pre-existing statute, right? I mean, that's how overwhelming the support for independence is in Alberta right now. So, you know, one of the things that we're looking at is our goal for this month is to actually get 600,000 pledges for signatures. And we're considering triggering, you know, the referendum procedure under the old act and getting the signatures together in the 90-day period, so that we can then have the bureaucrats and Elections Alberta, you know, have the lead time that they need to then organize the referendum, to have the referendum in this calendar year. I suspect if they try to hold us to the 120-day period in the new legislation, if we're waiting till July for the new legislation to come down and be proclaimed, you know, add 120 days to that, spin up time for, you know, Elections Alberta, et cetera. You know, we could be January or February before we could have a referendum and vote ourselves out of Canada. But everybody that I'm working with on my team, you know, we are incredibly gung-ho, we're incredibly focused, and we're moving forward and doing everything we can to have a referendum this year and to have Alberta declare itself an independent country this calendar year.
Well, those are some very ambitious goals you have there, Jeff. Got to hand it to you that way. You're certainly got some big dreams there. And I mean, hey, I mean, if you've got 250,000 people pledging already, I guess it is doable. We'll be watching very carefully to see if that happens. Okay, thanks for your time today, Jeff.
You know, obviously the support for independence in Alberta right now is overwhelming. That the last election just proved once and for all that that Ontario and Quebec don't care whether Alberta stays in Canada or not. And my take on that last election is that we don't even need to separate from Canada. Ontario and Quebec in the last election voted to separate from Alberta.
So you're feeling like we've been kicked out more than wanting to leave.
Oh no, I think they've told us once and for all we're not welcome, and God bless them. I'm happy they did it. You know, it's a good wake-up call for our fellow citizens. And, you know, it's time to do something different. You know the old saying, right? You do the same thing over and over and over again and you expect a different result. It's the very definition of insanity. It's time for a change. And it's time for Albertans to all be given a 30% pay raise by getting rid of all federal taxes and regulation in Alberta.
Well, Jeff, very interesting conversation today. I'm out of time. Got to leave it there, but thank you so much. Jeff Rath, the General Counsel for the Alberta Prosperity Project. You can check out their website, albertaprosperityproject.com.
It seems in every federal election, the issue of gun control comes up. Our nation continues to see high levels of violent crime, which many believe is fueled by the number of guns in Canada. But are the rights of registered gun owners, hunters, and sport shooters being violated with government restrictions? And will gun restrictions actually reduce violent crime? Or is it just virtue signaling? Joining us to chat about this is Rick Blakely. He is the president of the Lethbridge Fish and Game Association and Sport Shooting Facility. Rick, great to have you with us.
Thank you very much. Good to be with you.
First of all, can you just tell us a little bit about the Lethbridge Shooting Sport Facility? Where is it located and what kind of sport shooting takes place there?
Well, it's located in Penequin Park, down in the coulees. The use of the range let's start with we have Blood Tribe Police, Lethbridge City Police. We have a whole bunch of police departments that use us, K Division, RCMP. So that's one use that's quite prevalent during the day. We put in a $1 million carbine range for them. So that's a fairly active and revenue generating piece of our range. The other pieces are sports shooting. There's a number of different sports that people participate in. They're really passionate about it, and so we have about $150,000 worth of machines that throw shotgun targets all over the place, so people can can try and hit them. They aren't big enough for me. Then we have long range, 300-yard range for hunters to make sure that they are ethical hunters. That's really important because you don't want to. Hunting is actually the harvesting of animals to bring populations in line, and you don't want to injure an animal. Ethical hunters want to make sure that the animal is euthanized fairly quickly. Then we have, we're just putting in about $85,000 worth of archery, 3D targets, and equipment down there to improve our archery range. That's another area where hunters come down and hone their skills. And competitive shooters. We have provincial 3D archery target winners. We have all sorts of people down there. We have a handgun fellow who has competed in the Pan American Games. We now have a person who is working on he's training for the World Championship 3-gun competition. I believe that's happening in Czech Republic. So the range is really active with a lot of people who are passionate about making some little thing go as far as they can and hit a place in the distance. So that's basically in a nuts. We have a bunch of programs for children. We have a classroom, and the classroom has an air gun range in it, and so youth go in there and learn from our fellow who is the ISSS champion. Anyway, I could spend half an hour telling you what we do down there.
Well, sounds like you have a lot of stuff going on at the range there. Sounds like there's a lot to experience there. So, but moving forward now, can you give viewers an update on where we're currently at with Canada's gun laws that have been changed since 2020 with Bill C-71 and Bill C-21 as to handguns and so-called assault weapons?
Well, that's an interesting topic. The government has called these things assault rifles, but really the rifles that they're talking about, in particular that popular one, the AR-15, is actually Armalite Rifle 15. It was designed for people who did 3-gun competitions, and so it's light and it's versatile. The firearms used in the past for assault rifles were had a wood stock, and you had to hold them kind of funny. But in the Vietnam War, they were walking through the jungle and they got jumped, so they had to be able to acquire a target really quickly. So those guns have what we call a tactical stock, which means that they're just ergonometrically better than the previous wood stocks. The government decided that anything that looks like that is an assault rifle. As a matter of fact, they banned the 22 caliber, which is a really small caliber used for blinking. There's two different versions of it: a word stock and what they call a tactical stock. The actions are the same, yet the tactical stock gun is prohibited and the wood stock is not. It really doesn't make sense. It's mostly political gesturing, or it's I guess you could call it gaslighting. It's trying to satisfy the citizens that they're doing something, but really what they're doing is vilifying people who are actually quite patriotic citizens who are licensed, who have taken training, who the RCMP have done background checks. As a matter of fact, the statistics on people who are licensed doing anything violent is less than a percentage. If any one of our licensed firearm owners is violent, even in a hockey game, playing hockey, they can lose their ability to shoot. Yet the government seems to want to allow, not allow, but with the current justice system and with the border controls, they allow the criminals to basically run free with firearms, even machine guns, which are definitely assault rifles, assault pistols. They're designed exactly for what they're saying that we have.
Now, the federal government has put a buyback mandate in place and is trying to force gun owners to surrender their banned weapons to the government, which promises to buy them back at fair market value. Has that actually started yet? And if so, how many guns have they bought back so far and at what cost?
Well, you got to remember there's 2.2 million licensed firearm owners in Canada. That's a fairly large political group, and if you include the people they influence. The government put the legislation through in an order in council originally, which it isn't debated. It's just the Governor General puts it in, and so they never owned them. They can't buy something back that they never owned. It's just a political gesture to say they're working on crime, yet crime has increased dramatically since they took power.
And what kind of impact is this having on gun owners and also on gun store business owners?
Well, let's start with the range. I mean, they seem to be really focused on eliminating all firearms from civilian use, and that's been a stated goal by many, including the current person who's running for the Liberal Party. I'm beyond words on that topic. Yeah.
Now, we should probably ask, what exactly is an assault weapon? You mentioned the AR-15, AR not standing for assault rifle, but Armalite. I know one of the terms the government used previously was firearms designed for the battlefield. That sounds scary, but is that anywhere close to an accurate description?
Well, I've talked to many soldiers, and none of them would go into battle with any of these firearms that they've banned. They're semi-automatics. A soldier needs a firearm that'll shoot rapidly, like a machine gun or 3-shot bursts. These things are not, well, some of them are bolt-action rifles, so they are not, definitely not military grade. The joke is that they're going to give them to the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians wouldn't take them into battle if they wanted. So it's kind of ridiculous. And back to your other question, if they ban all firearms, that means our range will close. We won't have a range. We won't have a place. Well, I guess it'll still be there, but we have a number of people who are passionate. The businesses have lost billions already. We're closing sporting goods stores, what I understand, quite dramatically, including those in Lethbridge, and that's an economic hit to us.
And I believe that the groups pushing for gun control are doing so out of honesty-held beliefs that this will increase public safety. But what do the stats actually tell us?
The stats say that licensed gun owners are less than 1%, and that crime has increased dramatically. And I forget the stat. I mean, it's a fairly large. If you look at the graph, it's going up quite considerably because of the lack of control at the border. Guns are coming across the border. They're coming in from Europe. The gangs are growing in size and power. I heard about a fellow who was caught with drugs and guns and cash. And the judge, I don't know if this is true, but the judge gave him his cash back, sent him on his way, and a policeman caught him buying a new gun on the streets of on the steps of the court. So is that effective? I would say not.
So, and you're talking about gang crime in our cities, and so will this legislation actually fix anything? You know, are criminals law-abiding citizens in one area but not? And where are criminals getting their weapons from?
Well, citizens are being vilified, and criminals and gangs are being encouraged. If you ask me, there seems to be no punishment for criminal activity, especially violent criminal activity. It's counterintuitive. It really is. It doesn't make sense. So that's why I kind of like Poilievre's phrase, common sense legislation.
So now we're coming up to a federal election. So are there any federal parties that would repeal Bill C-71 or make changes to protect the rights of gun owners?
Oh, definitely. The conservatives under Poilievre have said this is ridiculous. It isn't a solution. We should be spending the millions, it could be billions, that would be spent on a buyback program on mental health, on police, on jail, on actually working with the youth to dissuade young people from going into gangs.
So let's switch gears for a bit here and talk about the many individuals and even families with kids who come out to the Lethbridge sports shooting range. Is this a safe sport?
Thank you for asking. We did a presentation to council about, I think it's 5 or 6 levels of safety. Our first level is everybody who uses the range, or everybody who uses the range should be a range officer, and that's a 4-hour training that we do, and it's mostly about attitude and being safe. And we're one of the only ranges in the middle of the city, so we have to be extra safe, and that's why we put in extra measures to ensure the safety of the range, including things that would catch errant bullets, bullet traps, all sorts of stuff. So there's about 6 levels of safety, up to and including the big coolie wall at the back of the range. The range officers are in charge of safety, and they guarantee that people will be safe. As a matter of fact, kind of interesting, a lot of them are coaches, and they do training, and they take, well, we've got youth groups that come in, and one of the things that we've found is, especially with single parent mothers and people who don't have a lot of money, our sport is pretty cheap because we provide the firearms and the ammunition for the children. And we're finding that they're getting out of the basement and the video games with blood and gore, and coming and actually feeling what it feels like to be very responsible, understanding what rules are and why they're rules, and you know, they become much better citizens because they understand what it's like to be responsible for something that could be very dangerous if in the wrong hands. I mean, you used the term weapon earlier in the discussion. A weapon is something that is used by the military. It's used to kill people. A firearm, we use the term firearm because that's a term used to put a little piece of lead downrange and hit a target. It hits something that is fairly inert.
So you talked about it being an affordable sport to get into. So so for parents that are, you know, maybe want to get their child involved, but they're a little strapped on cash, what are we talking about for costs to get involved?
Nothing.
Wow.
That's what we do for the community. We when we took out a grant from the city, we promised to do $30,000 worth of community service. This last year, we did it was about $120,000 worth of work with youth, with the community, and that's volunteer hours and ammunition and targets and all that sort of stuff. So that's what we do. We've got over 2,000 members, and we've got revenue from all of the police agencies using the range. For that, we can afford to do a lot of stuff for people. As a matter of fact, lately we've had children bringing their parents down to the range because they want to get out of the basement, and they want to get out in the outdoors, and they want to be with other people.
And it's a good time of the year to do it as we head into the warmer months. Rick Blakely is the president of the Lethbridge Fish and Game Association and Sport Shooting Facility. Rick, thank you so much for your time today.
You are so welcome, and thank you for asking these very good questions. You have a good day.
You're welcome. I'm Naveen Day. On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, thanks for watching.